What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video on what if Deku was transported to Danmachi part 6. Now, before we get into this, I just want to say thank you guys for hitting 1.1. We hit that real quick, so I do want to say thank you. And then I want to also shout out the people in the Discord who had joined in between videos, and it's a long list, so buckle your seats. Thank you, Wolfie, Keen of Keens, 1126, Last of Us, 21, Nova Wolf, 204, EMCXD, Morty, Not Dark 20, GG24, Bone Daddy What If, Midoriya versus Deku versus Izuku, I Don't Know, and Villain Deku. Thank you all for joining the Discord. And if you guys want to join the Discord, go ahead and do it. We chat, we chill. Like I said, I'm gonna be doing a gaming channel soon. I'm gonna be starting that up. Oh, I don't know if that video is coming out yet. Wait, let me explain. I'm gonna be doing a gaming channel. Yes, there will be a gaming channel. It'll probably be about around once a month, and I'll probably play games like Among Us or other games like that on the Discord itself. So, if you guys want to go check out the secondary channel, if I've created it by now, it'll be linked in the description. If I haven't, well, then it probably won't be linked in the description. I don't know. It would probably take me a little bit to create it, especially because I have to get through this week. And my throat's kind of turning out bad. So luckily, I'm one step ahead and I've prepared. So, let's jump straight into this what if. Izuku woke up the next morning, chilling on floor 30. Really had a different feel to it than chilling on floor 18. It felt more, well, if he had to put it in words, threatening, off-putting, to say the least. Izuku really didn't care too much, seeing how he remembered how, well, doing some other things back in his world made him feel as well. Like storming Overhaul's base. It was a pretty scary event for Izuku, but he still made it through. Eventually, Izuku prepared to go ahead and move on with the rest of the expedition party. Izuku will be taking a rear guard in this expedition party, so he'll be back with Riverdale and Leafia. Them three will be in the back row. Izuku was placed back there mainly just because these later floors start to get a little bit more dangerous, and they rather not have it that their newest and currently biggest potential personnel ends up dying because of it. Eventually, Izuku and them all start to travel down deeper into the dungeon. Their plan wasn't to go too deep this time. They were only going to go to 445, and then they were going to come back. Eventually, they all started to descend deeper and deeper into the dungeon. It was pretty peaceful, Izuku lamented. It was kind of weird. Some of the floors really didn't have much in it, while the other floors did. They planned to make it to floor 45 today, and then get the materials they need, and then backtrack back up to floor 39, which was another dead zone very similar to floor 30, where monsters really didn't spawn that often. Eventually, they made it down to floor 45. 45. God. Izuku also realized that this floor, unlike the previous desolate wasteland floors that he was experienced to and quite used to by now, seemed to be way more, well, way more watery would be the best way to put it, Izuku thought. The floor itself gave off a weird apparition. The entire floor was like a giant waterfall cascading downwards. Izuku couldn't see almost any monsters at all. until one jumped out of the water where Tion intercepted it and punched it. Izuku then realized that they were dealing with water creatures. Izuku really didn't know how to deal with water creatures. Really just enjoyed the ride. They eventually found the location that they were looking for. It was a pond to collect some water. This water was used in a variety of different things. So it was not uncommon for the Loki Familiar, being what essentially is the only group of people that can make it down here, to pick up the water and take it back up. Izuku was chilling when eventually Az came by. And for anyone who wants to say it's not Az, it is Az. I searched it up. I'm a good boy today. I did search it up. So it's pronounced Az, and I can put a link in the any people who says it's pronounced differently. Okay? Okay. Eventually, Az sat next to Deku. She started saying, "So, Izuku, how's your, trip down here? Is it fun?" Izuku kind of sighed and was like, "Well, Az, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty boring. Most of the creatures here I don't even get to fight, which kind of sucks. Then again, I don't like the base idea of taking away someone's life. But back where I came from, heroes had to fight constantly. It was kind of, more sporadic, I guess you could say, especially after the most recent events that happened. Hundreds of cities were demolished by that man. I'm surprised we were able to even fend him off. Much less, if you could call it, I guess you can say, we held him back. We really didn't defeat him at all." Aiz was confused about what Deku was talking about, and she inquired. She's like, "Heroes? What do you mean?" Izuku said, "Don't worry about it. It's nothing that I can share with you currently at this moment." Az was once again confused, because hearing heroes, which is kind of a trigger word for her, and then not being able to get any more information about it slightly upset her. But she knew Izuku's backstory must be pretty bad if he didn't want to share it with her. So she decided not to push Izuku anymore. Eventually, Deku started to state that the only person that knows of his backstory and where he came from is the goddess herself. Well, the goddess and the captain, because the captain was there. But the goddess is under multiple vows not to explain anything. This once again caught Aiz off. She knows about the captain's, let's just say enjoyment of things. So for her to swear off not being able to actually use the information must be a pretty big deal. Eventually, Izuku started to ask Aiz about her, what was going on with her. Aiz was like, "Well, you see, currently I'm not doing much myself either. I guess you could say we're both pretty much just chilling. Seeing how there's nothing that neither me or you could do, would you like to go ahead and eat lunch with me?" Izuku was starting to feel quite peckish. It was gauging around lunchtime, and he was pretty hungry for the munchies. So eventually, Izuku was like, "Yeah, I'll go eat some lunch." Izuku followed Aiz to where she had appeared to set up a small little picnic-looking area. Izuku wanted to really question this, wondering why Aiz had a picnic set up, and how did she have a picnic set up, but decided against it for the time being, mainly because Aiz is kind of scary when she doesn't want to say anything. So Deku just sat down and chilled. Aiz eventually came back with some food. The food looked edible, to say the best about it. It didn't look super good, but it looked decent. It looked like something Izuku could eat once. Until he took a bite of it. Izuku took a bite of the sandwich looking thing and instantaneously had a look of, oh my god, what did I just eat on his face? He was very confused about the food he had just ate. It tasted horrible, but it wasn't bad, which caused Deku to be very confused about how he felt about the food that just entered his mouth. See, Izuku really couldn't cook, but he could do something better than what was explored. So Izuku looked around the water-looking area. He found some herb-looking objects. He picked them up and looked at them. They seemed edible, and found what appeared to be carrots resting there. Izuku got a brilliant idea, and then used magic. He made a brand new spell, and he said, "By the power of the trees in the forest and the earth down below, create me a bowl just like Calmly Woods would do." And suddenly, 2 bowls appeared in Izuku's hand, allowing him to, start preparing. He also ended up making forks using the same incantation, but replaced bowls with forks. This allowed Izuku to, eat what he called a salad, which was very shocking to eyes, because not only could Izuku use pretty, decent magic, he also not only could what appeared to be create wood out of thin air, and to Ai's knowledge, wood wasn't a magic that she knew about. She wanted to inquire more, but decided that she shouldn't ask Izuku more about his past. But she did inquire one thing. "So is this Kamini Woods guy you said a hero?" Izuku said, "Yes, he's a hero. He specializes in using wood. So I used his name for the spell." "Oh, that's amazing. Thank you," Izuku responded. Eventually, after eating their nice lunch that Izuku had precariously prepared, didn't taste too much better than the sandwiches, but it was better enough. Izuku then, with Az following him, head back to the camp. Eventually, everyone else saw that Izuku had left, but decided not to ask to leave the 15 and 16-year-old alone on their little excursion, as most of them called it. When Izuku got back, most of the guys had a rare glint of somewhat being upset and jealous with Izuku, which Izuku really didn't get, of course. Eventually, Izuku and Aiz both packed up their stuff and prepared to start heading back home. They started to make their trek up, stopping at floor 39, and then proceeding their way upwards, all the way up to floor 18. This time they stopped and took their break a little bit, and Izuku was put in the Vanguard party. While being in the Vanguard party, he started to head up even more. He met some people at the town and decided to pick up a small ring. He picked up this ring as a way to lament himself and remind himself of his adventures inside the dungeon, and also saw something that he thought would look good on Az, so he picked up that as well. Eventually, Izuku found Az and gifted her what appeared to be a small bracelet. The bracelet seemed to be a very form-fitting bracelet, seeming to be made out of what appeared to be rubber. Eventually, Az was like, Thank you, Izuku. I'll cherish it. No problem, Az. I just figured you would want something here. I ended up doing the same thing myself, and got myself one too, and I figured you would like it. I will. I'll cherish it for as long as I can. Thank you. Deku thanked Az for everything they did. Eventually, Deku and Az both became, well, somewhat closer. Most anyone could really see that Izuku and Az was a lot closer than what most people would assume. But they all were pretty non-caring about it. They all seemed to very realistically chill, and was excited that the young boy was slowly starting to open up to them. Knowing that Izuku was very well kept about his secrets and seemed to isolate himself a lot. Eventually, Izuku and the gang ended up heading up to floor 15 where they ran into some minotaurs. Az was fighting some minotaurs with bait, and Izuku was too. Izuku was able to take out all of his minotaurs when suddenly he saw a minotaur escape. Az was about to chase after it when Izuku said, "I got it." And he started to run after it too. And then Az, keeping up behind him, decided to run after it as well, knowing that they would be able to just make it out by the time it ended. Eventually, as soon as Az and Deku caught up to the Minotaur, it seemed to be crouched over something, what appeared to be a small man. Izuku ended up kicking the Minotaur, sending it flying while Az cut it in half, showering blood all over the man. The man looked at the two people, and Deku got a better look at the man. He saw that the boy, it was a little bit too early to call him a man, had red eyes and white hair, and seemed to be pretty young, about around his age even. The boy ended up standing up and ran out of the dungeon, quicker than Az or Deku could even talk or explain to him. Az then asked Deku, "Did we scare him?" And Izuku said, "No, most likely you didn't scare him. What happened was that he probably was more frightened as the situation in a whole. You didn't scare him, but I can bet you the Minotaur that almost literally murdered him did scare him." Az felt kind of saddened by this, but understood where Izuku was coming from, and eventually came over it by herself. Izuku and Az and the rest of the familiar ended up leaving the dungeon eventually. After they left the dungeon, they met up with the rest of the party. The rest of the party all headed back to Loki's place to celebrate leaving the dungeon and having a grand time about it. The next day, Izuku went in to get checked by Loki-sama. He was told that he was required to, as him having to get his, status updated would help increase his strength even more, which Izuku was down for, because the stronger he got, the better he could go. What shocked Loki was when she saw Izuku's stats. She saw them and was kind of shocked. She said, "Izuku." "Yes, Loki-sama?" Your stats are insane." "What do you mean?" "Well, you got an S rank in power, you got an S rank in durability, you got A rank in stamina, and you got A rank in magic, and a B rank in dexterity." I repeated one of those, "I don't care." This confused Deku a lot, and he said, "Is this good?" "Izuku, that's more than good. Do you wish to level up?" "Level up? What do you mean?" I guess you really don't know much about this world, do you? You see, when you level up, you increase your power by a lot. And I mean a lot. Almost times 2 your previous capabilities. Izuku then decided that leveling up was probably a very smart decision. If it can times his strength by what she said to appear to be 2, and make him infinitely stronger, then leveling up has its use cases. So Izuku told Loki-sama to do so, and she said, okay, it's gonna take a long time though. Not to mention some events are coming up soon, so since you're already at level 2, we're gonna need to have to get you an alias. Or hopefully try to get you an alias. An alias? What's that? Oh, God. Gods meet up every 3 months for this thing called the Danatis. And it kind of allows them to pick up names for adventurers that had gone through a level up. Or predominantly for levels that have reached level 2. You can end up choosing, well, you don't really get to choose, it's more of like it's chosen for you, your name. Do you have any aliases in mind? And Izuku said, I have one alias. What's that? The alias that I want, more than anything else, is Deku. Deku? What does that mean? Well, in my land, it means useless, but it was my hero name. Why did you choose useless as your hero name? You see, I chose useless as my hero name to show that anyone, everywhere, that useless isn't useless. You're not useless. No one is useless. Huh, kid. Okay. I'll see what I can do. After telling them what it means, they probably will give it to you no matter what. I don't think they'll have any issues calling a mortal useless, especially because the main goal is for helping mortals want to get stronger. So yeah, I'll give you your... I'll try to get you your alias of useless. Izuku smiled at this and thanked Loki before putting back on his shirt and leaving the room. The process had taken about around 40 minutes, which was longer than everyone else, so everyone else figured that Izuku had leveled up and had gotten progressively stronger. This was to the excitement of some and to the dismay of some as well. Knowing that Izuku had gotten stronger, this kind of put them in a tough position where he had only been in the Familia for 2 days, and if he had reached level 2 in that time of 2 days, not 2 days, it's been about like 2 weeks, my bad. In 2 weeks, then that was a new unsetted precedence for a scoring. That was quicker than the Sword Princess, which would be absurd. Eventually, Izuku ended up finding his room and decided to start trying to sleep. Eventually, he was able to fall asleep, but was woken up early the next morning by Az. Az was standing at his door. She questioned Izuku about his gear. She said, Izuku, I noticed while we were in the dungeon that you really don't have that much gear. You seem to not be weak, but you don't seem to have any gear to facilitate being anything, well, stronger. Izuku kind of tried to laugh this off. He understood what Az was coming from. He literally wore almost nothing. Of course, he had some boots on, but that was about it. Then Az asked him, Izuku, how much cash do you have? Cash? Izuku was trying to think, and he really couldn't tell her. He had gotten some monster cores, but not really a lot. Of course, after defeating the Floor 18 boss solo, he had way more than enough to actually be able to buy anything, but he had donated all those to the familiars, so he really had 0. And he's like, would you be happy if I said 0? Az looked at Deku kind of confusingly, and Izuku explained, saying, well, any core I got, I donated to the familiar. Because they paid for basic food and sleeping conditions, I figured it would be rude to me to hold on to my cores to spend on personal expenses. As really to understand where Deku came from, most adventurers weren't really much of the giving type, but eventually just denoted Deku's personality to being somewhat of that of a hero's, like the ones her father used to tell her, or her mother would. Eventually, Aiz was like, okay, let's go. Izuku asked. Aiz then explained, saying that we need to get you some equipment. And I don't think you would like to just keep running around with just wearing basic peasant gear, or not really peasant gear, but a cloth shirt and pants, with very little light armor at all. So yes, let's go. Let's get you some gear. Oh, but I can't get money. I can't do that from you. Take any cash from you. That would be horrible. Well, think about it. This isn't taking cash from me. This is me helping out another member of my familia to make sure he doesn't die on me. Izuku kind of shrugged the back of his head, realizing that Aiz wasn't really giving much of his choice, and he really wouldn't be able to do anything else for the rest of the day, so Izuku decided that he would. Eventually, Aiz led Deku to this very tall, giant building, which Izuku was kind of confused about that. Eventually, Aiz explained that she had talked to Loki-sama about getting Izuku some better equipment, and had heard that Loki-sama had talked to a goddess that she knew back in heaven, and that this goddess was gonna try to help out by crafting Izuku one of the pieces of equipment. Izuku's like, wow, I'm gonna get something forged by a goddess? Yes, this goddess also has, well, a divinity in forging. That's amazing. Yes. So let's go. Izuku followed Aiz into the building. Eventually, she led Deku to a very weird location. It seemed to be almost like a workshop, a blacksmithing forge. Eventually, Deku saw a girl standing in front of him. This girl had red hair and was relatively tall, but she had an eye patch over her eye. Izuku said, hello, my name is Izuku Midoriya. The girl, who was previously turned away from him, turned towards him and said, oh, you're the kid Loki sent over. Hello, I'm Hephaestus. I'm the god of forging and fire. So, Izuku, I heard that you need a piece of equipment and that you're pretty strong. So, what's about it? What equipment are you looking for? Izuku thought about it and decided to say that, well, where I come from, swords and stuff weren't really well used. Guns were used occasionally. They weren't used commonly, though. Hephaestus raised her eyebrow and said, guns? What are guns? Izuku was kind of caught off guard by this, because he figured guns were kind of a common item. Of course, Izuku then explained, well, in my country, guns are an item. This item shot small metal projectiles towards its opponent at terrifying speeds, enough to penetrate and wound the opponent greatly. And depending on what else, it could also fire other items, like small metal bullets that caught on fire being shot. It primarily fired small yellow bullets into a cylindrical tube that tend to have gunpowder. Izuku decided describing a musket would be the best way to kind of explain how the gun worked. Huh. So are you saying you want one of these guns? And Deku shook his head, saying no. Izuku then went on to explain that myself, I didn't use guns. I was much more of a hand-to-hand combat user. Seeing how there was multiple people with multiple different powers and capabilities in my world, gun usage was quite useful, don't get me wrong. It helped people without special capabilities and powers to kind of even out the odds against people who did have special abilities or powers. Hephaestus was kind of confused, and she said, "Can you draw me a schematic of a gun real quick?" Izuku then asked if she had any paper or pencils for him to draw with. He then went over to a table, and since Izuku had been sketching quirks and other stuff, sketching a gun wasn't too hard for him. He first started off with the trigger and explained that the trigger was really connected to a hammer, and that the hammer would hit a percussion cap that would then ignite the small gunpowder inside the barrel. Not inside the barrel, inside the casing, which will then fire the small projectile forward at a frightening speed, as he continued to draw a small revolver. Hephaestus was kind of like shocked by this, because this was a pretty impressive design. It looked pretty amazing from what she could see, and seemed to be quite versatile if you put the right runes on it. Someone could transfer even a small amount of magic into this weapon, and it could change its bullets from regular bullets to fire bullets to electric bullets to water bullets, any bullet the person needed. All they would have to do was load it. Izuku then drew out the shell and showed how much gunpowder and stuff was in there. Izuku did look into guns, mainly just because, in case if he had to become a cop, knowing how a gun worked was a kind of useful skill. Eventually, Hephaestus was like, "Okay, thank you for satiating my craving desire to know what weapon you were talking about. Now, I do ask, what kind of item are you looking for?" Izuku then thought about it and it brought out his boots. He took off his boot and showed it to Hephaestus. Hephaestus looked at the boot and saw that the toe of the boot seemed to recoil back and then spring forward again. She's like, "So you want an upgraded version of this steel-toed boot?" And Izuku explained that he would, but he was wondering if there was any way that you could make it like grow with him or have any special things. And Hephaestus looked at him kind of weird, like, "What were you wondering about, sir?" "Well, you see, my my skills allow me to heighten my strength and speed to an absurd degree. For example, I can fight as on the same level with my current quirks. Well, as long as she doesn't go full out with using aerial. So, I was wondering if you can equip the boots with either, like, something that helps increase their strength over time to make them stronger as I grow stronger, because eventually my attacks are going to outstrength the boots, causing severe issues and damage to the boots. Or maybe you can give it a special elemental bonus, like when I channel magic into the boots, it gains fire, or gets caught on fire, and make it out of a fire resistance material. And then eventually Deku also bought out a pair of gloves and said, "These gloves are primarily used to conceal my black whip, which is another innate skill I have. See, black whip is a useful skill because it allows me to basically hold my targets in place for as long as I need them to be." I see that. That seems to be quite useful. Now, see, there is an issue with it as well. What's the issue? Well, you see, even though it is a very useful skill, and the whips are as strong as my magic parameter is, which currently I just recently got to level 2, so it's not that strong. It's saying about around 950 currently. Which kind of shocked Hephaestus, because that means that he trained his magic a lot. Deku then stated, "My black whips, I want to help be strengthened or anything else, and I would also like it to where when I punch something, it distributes the shock force into the person." And why is that? Well, you see, my physical strength kind of outlasts my body's durability. So, if there's a way I can mitigate the damage to my body while maximizing the damage output to my opponent, that would be pretty cool. Eventually, Hephaestus said, "Okay, well, I can maybe get your weird design ideas to work, kid. And how about this? I'll do it for free, as thanks for your little showing of the gun thing." Izuku was like, "Really? There are more weapons if you need anything else." And she's like, "There's more what?" "There's more guns. I only drew a revolver. I don't really know what else to draw, but there are some other weaponry that evolves around the same base mechanics." "Huh, okay, kid. Sure, how about this? Every time I forge you a new piece of gear, you show me one new schematic for a gun. As long as it's not something that I've already created myself. And in return, I'll do your stuff for free. How's that sound, kid?" "That sounds amazing. Thank you, Miss Hephaestus-sama." "Don't worry about it, kid, and just call me Hephaestus." "Okay." Eventually, Izuku and Az both left the shop. Izuku and Az decided to go eat. They had decided to eat some, well, local cuisine. It was a crepe. Izuku got strawberry while Az had gotten chocolate. Az was eating hers and looked over at Izuku's, and then quickly snatched a bite of Izuku's. Izuku was kind of shocked by this. He was like, "Az, you stole a bite of mine." She's like, "Well, do you want a bite of mine?" Izuku kind of flustered at the situation, but decided to tempt fate and say yes as he took a bite out of Az's thing. Eventually, they both finished their meal and went back over to the mansion. Izuku ended up going to bed that night with a kind of happy look on his face. He was happy that he was able to do everything he could today, and was quite happy about the events that happened, as he started to gently drift off to sleep. And that's where I'm going to leave it off, guys. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you loved it, hit the subscribe button. And until next time, goodbye.